please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fryrick?
Here.
Mr. Posnell?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Scalette? Mrs. Schrader? Mr. Sears?
Here.
Mr. Toman? Mr. Watts?
Thank you. Reminder to please silence your cell phones during the meeting. And this is your first opportunity for public comment. All comments and questions will be addressed to the president. Board and staff members will not normally respond to comments or questions during the meeting unless recognized by the president for this purpose. Comments will be limited at the discretion of the president to 5 minutes or less. Going once. Please, your name and your address, please.
My name is Carla Purdy, and I live at 791 Hillcrest Road, right across from the alternate sports field off of Midland Avenue. We deal with near daily instances of people using that field, throwing garbage in our yard, parking in our grass to get their vehicles off the road as much as possible, blocking our mailbox so we don't get mail, lights from the field shining in our bedroom windows, at times even when the field is not being used, loud music playing over the sound system for practices for whatever the reason, band practice and band director blaring in our bedroom windows, now being forced to look out our picture windows 7 days a week, I suppose now 365 days a year, at the porta pot that was recently moved from a less conspicuous spot to right across the street from our driveway. Watch the regular servicing of the porta pot. In addition to all these things, we are forced to endure since this field has been constructed. We can never understand why so many lacrosse balls always ended up in all areas of our yard. We have picked up dozen after dozen lacrosse balls, either returned them to the field or thrown them out. About 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in my front yard with the dog, looking in the opposite direction of the field. All of a sudden, I saw something bounce off the roof of the house next to us and fall in the yard between the two houses. I went over to see what it was and found the large piece of this lacrosse ball laying in the yard. The other piece was later discovered in another part of our side yard closer to the school. One of the maintenance men was running the lawnmower over at the school property at the time. Our lot is 164 feet long. So I'm guessing you can understand the velocity force that this ball must be traveling to leave your field, across Midland Avenue, across our property completely, and into the next property boundaries. I realize none of you have to deal with this, but this is our home. Not just an adjacent property to the school, it's our home. A home that my 5- and 6-year-old grandchildren play in the yard. The dog walks around the yard. We work in the yard. We've tried to be good neighbors and not complain about all that we have to deal with on a daily basis, but this is too much. If one of these balls was catapulted into our yard and hit my grandchildren, the dog or us, I'm sure under the right circumstances, it could kill someone, not to mention the lesser problem of damage to our property. I understand it may be inconvenient to stop the mower, get off and pick up the balls instead of running over them and just being shot out by the mower, but my family's safety should be the top concern, and this matter addressed in exactly that way. My intent in being here tonight is to let you all know about this safety issue, so heaven forbid something happens in the future. No one here or at school can say that they knew nothing about this safety issue and the problems that we deal with. I'm requesting to be notified of the remedy the school district takes to address this and correct this safety concern for my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Would you like a copy of this?
Yes, please. And you have the link to the Planning Committee meeting of September 9th minutes. Are there any corrections or changes? I think they can be approved as submitted. Mr. Sears.
Okay, our August interest estimate is around $71,700, primarily from CDs. And tonight, as usual, we have a consent agenda. Would any board member like any of the items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, Chair moves approval of the below-mentioned items.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And a hush falls over the audience. I think this can be a short roll call vote. Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead.
This will be considered an unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
For the board president's report tonight, I had the sad honor of reading a book plaque. It says, in recognition of 6 years as Secretary of the York Suburban School Board, June 30th, 2013 through September 30th, 2019, and upon your retirement following 30 years in education, this will be presented to Ms. Corinne D. Mason, with deep appreciation from the students, staff, and community of the York Suburban School District for your dedication and commitment to our schools. Corinne, we will miss you. And with that, Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Tonight, we have Music Boosters, represented by Elaine Fogdahl, to give a report.
I'm bringing my tea with me. I'm sorry about the quality of my voice. I seem to have the same virus that is going around a lot of the school right now, so I'm going to do my best. So good evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of the York Suburban Music Booster Association, which is also known as the YSMBA. My name's Elaine Fogdahl. I was into the district 5 years ago when we relocated from the Midwest. Both of our students are at the high school now, and they've both adjusted well, and we really give the music program a lot of credit for that. They've both had many positive experiences because of their involvement in the music program, and we are grateful for the district's support. So I'd like to share a little background about the YSMBA first, which was originally founded as the York Suburban Band Parents Association in 1984. It's evolved over the years and now incorporates all vocal and instrumental groups. Its purpose is to support and aid the YS High School music programs and directors. And there's 3 primary ways the YSMBA does this. We provide volunteer support, we provide financial support, including opportunities for students to fundraise, and we celebrate the accomplishments of our students and directors. So first I'd like to talk just a little about our students. YS students enroll in performance ensembles in high school by electing to take chorus, orchestra, or band as a co-curricular subject. Many students participate in 2 of these groups, and some participate in all 3. In addition to meeting as a class during the school day, they perform at 4 concerts per year as well as at graduation. Students can also participate in extracurricular groups, whether they're enrolled in a music class or not. These groups perform for our school as well as for our community. Last school year, these groups included YS Singers, a cappella club, string ensemble, marching band, jazz band, percussion ensemble, the musical, and the musical pit orchestra. Many of our students also choose to audition for various PMEA ensembles. That's the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association. This past school year, YS had 5 students attend district band, 1 student attend district jazz band, 1 student attend district orchestra, and 1 student attend district chorus as well as regional chorus. Excuse me. Our students also represent YS in various community organizations. This past school year, YS had 7 high school students participate in the York County Honors Choir. and 4 high school students participate in the York Youth Symphony. So we have a lot to celebrate, and we appreciate the district's ongoing support for those programs. So next I'd like to talk about our volunteerism, and I'll do that by inviting you all to the Big Orange Cafe. That is a joint effort with the YSMBA and the All Sports Boosters. So if you come to a football or soccer game this fall, be sure to come visit us at the concession stand. If you come for one of the remaining home football games, be sure to stay for our marching band show. I believe 2 of the nights from the next 3 games we perform after the show, or after the game rather. This year's show celebrates the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, and it's a lot of fun. And our marching band appreciates the investment the district made in new uniforms last year. They look great, and they've really given the band a boost of confidence, so thank you for that. The concession stand and Herb Schmidt Relays event are the largest sources of revenue for the YSMBA, and we are proud of our partnership with Sports Boosters and those efforts. This fall, YS music students and their families will volunteer a combined total of 276 hours of their time to the concession stand, and many more to the spring relay event. Our families also provide critical volunteer support to extracurricular programs. That includes uniform and equipment crews for the marching band and support for the YS Musical. Last spring, our students and families supported the first district-wide Arts and Music Festival, and we look forward to doing so again this year. And we also provide a lot of meals. If you watch the back doors to the high school on a marching band showcase day or during craft weeks for the musical, you'll see a lot of food being brought in to keep the kids going. So why do we do all of this? We do this so we can support things that go above and beyond district support for our music programs. That includes providing financial support for things like sending our drum majors for the marching band to camp, supplementing staff, equipment, uniform, and supply costs for the marching band, providing a meal for students participating in the musical, providing a reception for our graduating seniors following their last concert, providing monetary awards and scholarships for our music students. The YSMBA also facilitates several individual and group fundraisers to help fund student participation in music department trips. The department hosts a trip every other year, so students have a chance to go on a big trip and a small trip during their 4 years in high school. Through our YSMBA fundraisers, some students have been able to have the whole cost of their trip covered. Last school year was a small trip year, and our students visited the Poconos, performed for visitors at the Intrepid Museum in New York City, and finally attended a Broadway performance of King Kong. One more quick break, I'm almost done. So, in closing, I want to once again thank the school board for the support of our music program. We've all read a lot in recent years about the connection between music and academic performance, and I think our students here at YS are proof of that. This school year, 2 YS students qualified as national merit semifinalists. They were on the board, or on the screen rather, behind me. Both of them are music students, and last school year, 3 of 4 national merit finalists were music students. Additionally, YS recognizes the top 10% and those with a GPA of 3.9 or higher in each high school class with annual academic awards. Last spring, more than 40% of students recognized were members of the music department. So we're proud of our students, and we thank you again for all you do to support them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? I almost hate to make you talk.
I think Mrs. Fogel is being very, very modest. One of the National Merit students is her daughter, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Any questions? Sorry, I should have asked before.
No?
That's quite all right.
You're good.
Thank you
Here.
very much. Okay, at your place is the superintendent's report. I'll breeze through some of it and read other parts. It has three main things in it. Class size report, which we do annually at this time. And we've had class size reports in other communications up to this point, but this is the official formal class size report that we do every year. And then also community outreach, and then also some school police officer information. So for the class size report, the first table on page 1 will show you at grades 1 through 5 what our elementary class sizes are looking like, where the largest classes are. And in the last column in the table, you will see, just to make it a little bit more clear, the parenthesis parts. Those are classes above the number of classes above the guideline and the total classes. So, for example, in grade 1, we have 4 classes above the 4 out of 12 classes are above the guideline. So that's just to give you a little clarification. For the middle school, you will notice that some of these sizes are large, particularly in 8th grade, but we have some large ones in various spots. And the numbers are all listed there for you. Again, when you see parentheses, that's the number of sections that would be above the guidelines, or above 30, I should say, which is higher than the guidelines. Now, when you see number of sections, 30 or higher, we're talking about a total number of sections or grade level of, I think, 10. Is that correct, Dr. Krauser?
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
Sections per grade level.
Correct.
10.
Yeah, correct.
So in each grade level, there's 10 sections for every subject. On the third page, you'll have a table for the high school, and you'll see that there are in cases where some class sizes are rather small, and there's explanations for why those might be. Sometimes the registration requests are higher beginning of the school year, and kids drop the class for whatever reason to take some other class, and that could end up putting below. But we also have some large class sizes there as well, and you can see the average per teacher and average class sizes there. Before I move on, any questions about those for the time being?
Do you see the middle school size as a bubble moving through the system?
8th grade is a bubble. There's, what, 200, almost 250 kids there?
More than that.
More than that?
Yeah, slightly larger than that.
260?
Yeah.
And that bubble will move on to become Dr. Ellis's challenge. Not problem, challenge, going forward. So the 9th grade class is rather large, and so is the 8th grade class. The other classes are a little bit smaller.
Dr. Williams, just a point of clarification. If you look on page 2, grade 7 ELA, just reading across, average class size 22, clear enough, minimum 12, max 30, with a 2, in parentheses, meaning 2 of 10 sections have 30 kids in them.
Right.
But are there others that might have, say, 28 or 29, or it doesn't just jump from?
Well, with the average of 22, you're going to have some classes that are smaller than that.
Well, I understand that, you should be showing a minimum of 12, but between, what's the next largest below 30?
I think that, I'm assessing that one. That there might be an error on that. I'll check with Mr. Shirey. That one seems off. Because I think the same thing happened then, if you look in grade 8 history, the highest listed one is 29, but it's got a plus 330 section behind it, so there appears to be something off there.
Well, I mean, if I read it correctly, that's 3 that are 29, that have 29 kids in them?
No, that's, I'm reading the parentheses as 30-plus kids.
No, the number behind it would identify how many sections are above the max 30. And in that ELA, that number's not accurate.
Well, then what's the number of sections of 30-plus at the top?
So what it reads on the paper for grade 7 ELA, average class size 22, minimum class is 12, maximum class would be 30, and there's 2 sections at 30 or above. Yeah, but what I'm saying is that's, there's an error of that, because my data is showing something different, so I'll confirm with Mr. Shirey.
The live data.
Correct, yeah.
Well, this is from September 6th. So,
It-
it could be some discrepancy between what is in live now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It looks like there are 2 sections at 30, but to your point, I'm questioning how he got the average then if there's two sections above 30. So I'll just confirm that
Well,
with
those
him.
are 2 sections, there are probably 2 sections with 30,
Correct, that's what live data is showing, yeah,
2 with 30.
yeah.
So, there could be a discrepancy between September 6th and today's data,
Yeah,
but it wouldn't be by much.
correct. And it looks like, it looks like there's 30 students listed in there, so it's accurate,
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Okay.
With ELA, what determines the size? You know, because you've got a 7 or a 12 and you've got a 22, how do you determine who's where?
The ELA is a unique in 6th and 7th grade because English Language Arts is all of those subjects combined. So it's, because it actually includes 2 courses, it's split in half by the number of students. So for Mr. Shire to try to schedule those evenly, it's where you get discrepancy. So, for example, and Mr. Evans is an ELA teacher, so he can kind of attest to that. There are, 1 ELA teacher teaches really half of the student body. There's twice as many ELA teachers because they're really teaching an English class, which we'll call a language class, a reading class, and a writing class. So it's split into 2 sections. So that's why, to balance those sections out amongst 2 individuals per team, it actually ends up to almost be 2.5 members of that team, if I'm making any sense there.
Because of writing.
Correct. Mhm.
And then just again, not to put too fine a point, grade 8 history, max of 29, 3 of 30 plus. Doesn't work. The max is 29, you can't have anything bigger than 30.
Yeah, that's the one I circled. That there are sections, as I'm looking at live data, above 30, so there should be something listed at 31, and it might just been an error from Mr. Shirey, so I'll confirm that one. Mhm.
But again, looking at the small class sizes or the large ones, is there any math, there's definitely, or not definitely, is there still a group of students that are at an accelerated pace versus those that are not? Is there a way to look at the class
Correct.
sizes to determine
And
where they're sitting?
Correct, and to Dr. Williams' point, the hurdle comes in 8th grade in particular to balance those out, because they're also trying to balance the math, the class that's taking the algebra, and then you're adding a world language. So, for example, world language, we're only offering French, only available 1 period. So if we're trying to satisfy a French request and to also satisfy the math class, you can see that they become singletons in the schedule, which can weight one class to end up having 31 or 32, the other class might have 25. So it'd be great if we could just level everybody off, but to give them their request, it does create some variation. And the same thing at the look at the high school report, same kind of, as Dr. Williams mentioned, that balance that occurs in there.
So percentage of the class taking accelerated programs versus not accelerated programs, do you have a sense of that in our class structure? or
In
no?
math, in 8th grade right now, they're running 2 sections, I believe, of an accelerated math class, of the algebra.
So how many kids is that? Is it 20%? Is it?
I would say probably close to 20%, yeah. I can get the exact number for you.
Just a couple of little things jumped out. Here, examples where the minimum class is bigger than the average. So just want to go through these roughly.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll check with Mr. Shirey on that, see what, because I see the same thing happens in the 6th grade, or the 7th grade elective class. There's a 1 behind a 26, which should be greater than 30 for it to average out, so.
Okay. Any other questions about that part of it? All right, on page 4, some community outreach. Social workers put together some programming, mental health programming and related topics. The dates are listed there for those various topics. What Ms. King has done is managed to arrange childcare so that parents are able to attend and not have to worry about finding a babysitter or those kinds of things, because that's a barrier for some people to be able to get to these things. So she's taking care of that. She's done a wonderful job of creating some good programming that parents can take advantage. Well, anybody in the community can take advantage of, not just parents. Anybody. It's open to everybody. And the third item, school police officers. Last month I mentioned that the Personnel Committee was going to consider job descriptions for 2 school police officer positions that would be funded by a grant for the remainder of the 2019 year and the following year. Funding beyond that would be available via a competitive grant process. There's no guarantee of getting that funding. It is available. The Personnel Committee did deliberate the issue and was unable to make a recommendation out of committee. The administration has placed it on tonight's agenda as a discussion item, and we will be seeking board approval of job descriptions and the creation of 2 SPO positions at the October 7th board meeting. That recommendation is made in part on some survey data provided by both the York Suburban Education Association, thank you, and the administration. The administration believes that a multifaceted approach to school safety is necessary, and it requires both proactive measures and protective measures. We've begun addressing the social emotional well-being of students with some new programming and the fairly new position of social worker. Now we would like to enhance those offerings with SPO positions so that these professionals may work proactively with the student body to promote a safer environment. The SPOs would interact regularly with students in an effort to prevent incidents before they become incidents. They would also work in tandem with the social worker, guidance counselors, and local police departments to be proactive about student well-being. We do have some of that now with the 2 police jurisdictions that serve York Suburban, and we expect that to continue. The addition of the 2 SPOs will allow for more consistent and more thorough interaction with the student body. Of course, no precaution is foolproof. For that reason, we are recommending that the SPOs be armed with sidearms. This is a recommendation we do not make lightly. We make it because the law requires SPOs to be more than just properly trained school police officers. They must also be properly trained to work in school settings. An armed SPO will be more adequately equipped to deal with the physical threat if it were ever necessary, and if the officer would be in the general location of the threat. It is important to keep in mind that the primary purpose of having an SPOs is not to provide protection in the event of an unfortunate incident. While the protective aspect is an added benefit, the primary reason to have an SPO is to be proactive in issue prevention. Prior to making this recommendation, the York Suburban Education Association and the YS administration surveyed teachers and parents. All the data gathered from these surveys may be found at the link that would be on the electronic version of this document. There were 703 responses to the parent survey that asked 2 basic questions. The first basic question was, do you support having up to 2 school police officers within the York Suburban School District? And the 91% said yes, 9% said no. Second question is, do you support appropriately trained and certified school police officers to carry a firearm? 81.5% said yes, 18.5% said no. When YSEA surveyed its members, it used a Likert scale to solicit responses so that you could gauge where on the spectrum the people who were taking the survey would fall. In the first chart you see there, rate your support for having an armed lethal weapon such as a gun officer being hired. And 56% almost highly supported the concept, and you can see the various responses there. And then rate your concern over an armed lethal weapon such as a gun officer being a YS employee in your building with staff and students. And 52% said they were not concerned about that. So there have been several public conversations about this initiative over the prior months, and it is now time to make a decision. I understand that employing SPOs is a difficult decision. I also understand that some have strong reservations about an SPO carrying a firearm. SPOs are not a security panacea. Rather, they are one facet of a larger security implementation. We have already taken measures to address non-law enforcement aspects of safety and security. Now we are asking you to support the addition of these 2 grant-funded positions. Any questions?
Comments, questions?
On that topic?
A question. I read the 2 job descriptions that were included as links in the agenda, and they refer to the fact that this will be a 2-year appointment. When does the grant actually begin? Does it begin when it was granted or when we begin using it?
We could have used it at any point this school year,
Okay. But it actually expires when?
at the end of next school year.
In June of like 21 or something like that. Is that 20 or
2021, June 21.
June of 21? So you want to be careful there. It says this is a 2-year employment. It won't be a 2-year. By the time we hire these people, I think.
Oh, and the job description.
Job description, I would be very careful as to how you phrase the period of their employment. Obviously, you'll probably have the date that they're going to be hired or something, but I would
Right.
be careful when it says term or something like that, that you're not, you be careful. Thank you.
Presume we're gonna discuss this in the personnel committee report.
Yeah, it's an agenda item in the personnel section. Okay, and finally, the student enrollment report is attached. The numbers are not a lot different as far as, from last month, as far as the number of students in other placements. Continues to hover around 100. Right now it's 104. Our overall population is higher than it was last year at this time. And just to remind you that October 1 enrollment numbers are the official school year numbers. So next month's numbers will be kind of the official numbers for the year. Yes. Any questions on that? And tonight we have some administrators with us who, if you see them duck out during the meeting tonight, it's because, not because they're looking to get out of here, they are heading to New Jersey for some professional development tomorrow morning. So if you see them leave tonight, it's not because they don't want to be here, it's because they need to get on the road. How many hour ride do you have? 2.5. So we don't want you driving late, so. feel free-
That's just a trip through Baltimore traffic, so.
So feel free to depart when you feel you need to leave. Dr. Gully, would you like to go first tonight?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I just want to spend an opportunity tonight to talk about an updated learning opportunity that we have in place for our teachers in Indian Rock, and that's called a personal learning network. As most of you probably know, our goal for our teachers is to build their capacity, their learning, through professional development. One way we do that is through different assigned topics that we have, obviously from district goals and also building goals. One of the goals for teachers is to create what's called a PDT each year that's based on our supervision model, and that's a professional development target. So one way to ensure that those targets are being met is to make sure that we're giving teachers opportunities to learn professional development, to collaborate, to have those opportunities. So for this year, what we instituted was what's called a personal learning network, again, PLN. And what it is, it's really using technology, it's using social media to basically expand the horizons of learning. Many times that we do as a district, we have many amazing teachers, and we utilize those services and those techniques and that expertise that we have. But what a PLN does is through social media, it allows our teachers to connect not only within the district, outside the district, in the county, through the state, the country, and the world. So what it is a teacher has different topics that they're interested in, that they want to enhance their professional craft. Typically that's in the area of instruction or classroom management. So what we've asked the teachers to do is to sign up for a topic that complements what their PDT is. And so for each of our faculty meetings, we're going to take roughly 30 minutes for teachers to have personalized learning on topics, again, that's going to enhance their skills as a teacher. The benefits include open collaboration with other colleagues, an opportunity to share ideas, resources, and learning materials with anybody in the county, state, country, or world, and also to gain different perspectives on practice. Those social media accounts that I mentioned Could include Twitter and Instagram are two of my favorites, but also Facebook, YouTube, just different blogs that they can tap into. And the idea is a lot of our teachers might already do this, but the beauty of it, this personalized learning through this network, is they can do it anytime. They can do it from home. They don't always have to do it through school, but we want to make sure they have those opportunities for collaboration. But the biggest benefit is just, again, expanding their knowledge of sharing with one another. As far as the relationships, what we find, the teacher feedback so far is the fact that, hey, I connected with this person in Kansas or somebody in California, and again, not only are they collecting and gaining new ideas from that, but also they're soliciting and providing, so it's that two-way communication that's taking place. And the bottom line is they have all these resources at their fingertips that we use, for them to use. Just to give you an idea of some of the topics that we have at Indian Rock this year, math is a focal area, as we know, and we have our autistic support teachers that are involved in different math practices for our autistic students, our math specialists on different measurement standards. Fluency is a big piece that we have with computation, open-ended problem solving, so again, it's tapping into what can we learn more about that. Other topics include parent communication, again, using social media, how do we really maximize our opportunities rather than the old standard newsletter or an email or a text, but using applications through that. A lot of times where teachers are sending home information that shows pictures, giving a snapshot of what's taking place during the day, or during the week, or during a month. In addition to that, we have wellness activities that are in place through our wellness teachers, our PE and health educators. We have a group of 5th grade teachers that are focused on student citizenship, and that's more your academic, social, emotional, just overall well-being, rather than just that focus. Our nurses working on a dental program to enhance our curriculum, what we have. Again, math writing is, we have different math topics that teachers, again, are collecting information about it. Science and STEM, mindfulness, stress management, and resilience is what we have. So the goal is, through this first pretty much several months, through the fall and early winter, it's that collection time where teachers are going to continue to collect. They're going to learn, they're going to apply to their classroom. Obviously, the goal is to enhance their craft. If they're able to do that, then that filters down through the students. They're learning their achievement with that. But then through January through May, we're going to start having teachers report out on what they're learning. So we're going to have within our own building our inner learning that's going to take place. So we're excited for the opportunities. And what's nice about the PLN is once they feel comfortable with the topic and they feel that, hey, I've nailed this, then they're going to go on to another topic. But again, it's giving the time to do that, and they're going to keep minutes, so they will document the learning that's taking place with it. So again, just another way for professional learning that we're taking a new approach with that and trying to maximize all the resources that we have. Any thoughts, comments?
Greg, are these...
Good, sounds good.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are they formalized, or are they things that the teachers themselves build?
It can be both. I think part of it, like for example, any topic, if they're working on a relationship and something to enhance, their classroom management, it's basically they're typing it in and finding other educators or professionals or colleagues that have that same type, and it pops up, and they basically link with those other individuals. So it can be personal with that, but it's basically they can build what it is, what they want, what they're looking for, and then you get those replies back.
So is the linkage essentially a hashtag or something like that that ties people together that are interested in the same topics, or are there things like rooms where you could post something and wait for feedback?
I think part of it is you just basically put a topic out, like on Instagram, hey, I want to learn about such and such, and then they get individual replies back, or they learn about different classrooms that might be available with other educators that are exploring that and learning about it. Mr. Poston, did you have a question?
No, I was just saying, I like that concept. That was good.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Dr. Ellis.
I thought I'd share a little bit about our college and career world. Most of the time I've been here doing this presentation, the last couple of years, have talked about all the work the staff have been doing to put things in place to try to make more career experiences for our students. It's nice to see some of that come into reality. So I want to share some of the types of programs, but also to give you a little background. The last couple of years with our graduates, we have surveyed the college-bound students to find out what their majors or their intended majors, so we have a little bit of feedback so that we can develop programming around it. Just for interest's sake, ironically, our highest college major was undecided, which is okay. What I did realize, I need to clarify the survey question a little bit. I'm hoping they have some area of interest. They might just not have turned it into a major yet, so they're at least going in some direction. But the 5 most popular careers were biological sciences, which included some students with pre-med, but they were going in under as a biology major, business, nursing or some related medical support kind of career like a PT or an OT, engineering, and education. So those are the most popular majors for our students. So we're looking right now to try to develop some programs to bring in guest speakers in those particular areas just so students get a little bit more of a glimpse of it. Our first one, Mrs. Howard, our guidance office, has arranged a nursing speaker to come in because it's a very popular career for a number of our students. We've also been able to tap into YCAL, if you're familiar with the group, the York County Alliance of Learning. We are really spoiled in this area to have that organization compared to a lot of other areas. They do a lot of programming for students in York County, and we have a lot more of our students that are starting to take advantage of that. They offer sessions called Career Exploration Programs, which are either a one-day program or a couple evenings that students can go through to experience different careers. And it's been neat because some of our teachers have been advertising the programs as a way to tie back into some kind of a class project, whether it's a term paper or some other variations. We have 35 students signed up right now for the fall programs. They do additional programs in the spring. And those run the gamut from white-collar to blue-collar careers. There's students right now signed up for criminal justice, engineering, media careers, accounting, law, water and environmental technology, music industry, veterinary science, information technology, human services, even the CDL program, the automotive industry, and accounting. So it's neat to see kids getting an experience. They go and they're actually mentored by someone in these fields. They learn about it. They have a chance sometimes to get hands-on experience with it. So it's a great opportunity for them to try that out. YCAL also has a number of other programs for students to experience. They're part of the sponsor and help to bring forth the Kinsley program, which I've talked about before with the pre-apprenticeship program. We do have 2 students this year in the Kinsley program, but they also recently started a manufacturing one as well with some other area businesses. So we're trying to market that to students and getting students out to their interest days to see whether or not that's a feasible piece. They also sponsor manufacturing days. So there are all kinds of different manufacturers in York County that are basically opening up their plant for 2 hours, either a morning or afternoon, and inviting our students to come in. So we're actively marketing to our students to try to get as many students as possible. We specifically have lined up with Crescent Industries coming up in the next month to take some of our students there. They also offer a career clusters program in the spring where students basically have a field of interest. They might not know the specific career, but if they're interested in say, construction, they'll go to this place and they could be exposed to 5 or 6 different careers in construction. Or perhaps they have interest in medicine. Here are a number of different fields in medicine. So we're actively marketing to the kids to try to get them to sign up for those programs. And there's some other things that are going on. Our great partner just down the hill at York Tech, we're going to be taking students there on, I believe it's December 6th for a tour. Both our current students who may want to do it as a junior or senior in their part-day or full-day programs, but also their adult ed programs. And I'm meeting with Mr. Rogers, their assistant director here at the end of next week to try to plan a faculty outing during some of our staff development time to take our faculty down to see what they offer. So they've done that for a number of other schools with great feedback. So it's nice to have them as a partner nearby. We also have started to get more traction with students going to Thaddeus Stevens as well in Lancaster. It's a great opportunity for students. They're actually coming in to speak to our engineering and our applied technology students, anyone else from the student body to come and check out their program. They did the same presentation actually in an English class last year. So it's been good to have them here. And then also some of you have seen, certainly the parents, will have on October 18th, Junior Achievement is coming in to do a program they've done in many schools called their STEM Day. And basically it's for our freshman students to have a day just immersed in various STEM activities. So it'll be everything from automotive science on up through chemistry experiments and and everything in between. So it's all based upon volunteers coming out and supporting the Junior Achievement Mission, much like they do for BizTown and some of this other levels, and to give kids some exposure to the various careers. It's been very, very highly recommended by my colleagues at other other high schools. They've done a very good job with it, so we're looking forward to pulling that off for our kids here in a few weeks. So. Any questions or?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That goes for you, too. You need leave when you need to leave. Thanks. And that concludes our report.
Ms. Mason?
Thank you. You have before you the business office report, which includes items A through F. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, I would ask that a motion be made to approve the below-mentioned items.
So moved.
Eager. Any questions or comments? Then I think this can be a short roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. Do you want to share the information, or just leave it there for?
The donation from the Valley View PTO in the amount of $11,156.41 is for the second half of the playground equipment. We had already brought forth the first part. The total of playground equipment was $22,312.83. You have the dining review report attached for August, and any questions on the sales activity report. That concludes my report.
Dyer.
Can everyone hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
So I would like to start off by saying that overall homecoming was very successful. The parade, we were lacking trucks, but that was because our go-to company was short-staffed, but Student Council have reflected on the issue, and we plan on having that planned and everything organized in the spring of this year to refrain from that issue, but overall, everyone still had a lot of fun. We won our homecoming game against Kennerdale, 35-14. And we had up to 614 ticket sales. So overall, very successful. Currently, our football team is undefeated. JV just tonight won their Kennerdale game 40-0. Boys soccer is currently second in the district because they lost to Susky just recently, and recently just won against Dover 2-0, and tomorrow they have their rival game against West York. Girls soccer is 5-4. Girls volleyball is currently undefeated and also have their rival game against West Shore tomorrow. Last Saturday on the 14th, JV girls won their spectacular tournament out of 20 teams. Field hockey is currently 2-8, girls tennis 3-5, and we have Alex Clancy representing York Suburban for singles at counties. And we have Ania Kaha, Sophie Gilbert, Janelle Rice, and Alex Clancy for doubles. Golf, we have 3 district qualifiers and county participants, Will Stewart, Will Wong, and Thatcher for this Thursday. And cross country, the boys won their invitational. The girls came in 10th place. Girls are currently 8-1 and 10th in the state, and the boys are currently 1st in the state and undefeated. And on the musical side of the district, we have our first band showcase this Saturday, Red Lion Spectacular. On October 19th, we have a showcase this weekend as well. The Crucible is going to be on October 25th, 26th, and 27th. And the musical choices for the high school so far are either High School Musical, Oklahoma, or Music Man. And that concludes my report.
Okay. Thank you. The committee meeting schedule is posted online, and since Ms. Schrader's not here today, I will just mention that the minutes for the Academic Standards and Curriculum Committee report is posted, and Mr. Scalette is missing in action too. So his minutes and activity and communications are also posted. Ms. Frerick.
You have before you the August 7th minutes. I know that sounds like a long, long time ago. I think maybe you can think of a better way to get these minutes out to people more rapidly than 3 or 4, 3 months or so, something for the board to discuss. Basically, at the facilities meeting, more recently, we discussed the upcoming possible projects for next spring and next summer, and we're beginning to get some of that work the pre-work that needs to be done by the architects and the engineers prior to putting out the bid. Okay, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Sears.
Moving right along. Our meeting last Wednesday was about a 2-hour ordeal, but action-packed, to put it in Mr. Robinson's terms. We were all sitting on the edge of our seats.
The one I missed.
So if you were not there, I'd suggest you get a copy of this report. I think it may be posted, if not, get that, because this really gets to the heart of the matter of what we've been trying to do relative to the large financing opportunities or options that we have to consider in the district. And I think it does, if it does one thing well, it puts an interesting umbrella over what we might be willing to accept in the way of tax increases to cover these investments that we're about to make in either new facilities or reconfigurations of current facilities. They typically do what's called a wraparound so that they can keep the debt service under a level of, say, $5.5 million or $6 million or whatever that target number is, and to essentially commit for the long term a certain amount of millage from our total tax rate to cover the debt service. That minimizes the shocks to the system, and I think it maximizes flexibility. The big issue that we have to decide as a board is how much and when. The illustrations were anywhere from $40 to $80 million and a couple different alternatives, $60 million borrowing. Nothing extremely long-term so that future boards are not hamstrung for decades based on the decisions that we might make. But in almost every case, there has to be some willingness on the part of the district to bank money so as to keep that millage level stable. And those numbers were not insignificant. The money had to come from somewhere, typically from the operating budget, and then push that into a capital reserve account of some sort, if I'm saying it right. So that was a good bit of that presentation. The decision, to the extent that there was one, and it was important, was to have a parameters resolution on October 7th. Mr. Hovis will present that as he normally does, or authorize the borrowing and put the mechanism in place to do that. If we do nothing, according to Ken, our maximum exposure is about $15,000 in administrative fees. But the likelihood of doing nothing is pretty slim. We're facing significant needs. We just have to determine how much and when. I don't mean to minimize that, but I guess it's a forcing function to get us to take a very serious look at these options that are in the facilities arena that's going to consume most of this money and commit to making whatever steps we think are best for the district. The next piece of his presentation had to do with some refinancing opportunities, and really the question there was whether we have the administration go forward with essentially any level of savings, or do we as a board set some kind of a minimum to say that, for example, we won't really go forward unless there's at least $50,000 in projected savings. I think that's a fairly easy discussion, but one that we have to have. There were some examples given of different sorts of opportunities that other school districts have had over the years, and a lot of what I think Ken tries to communicate is that each one of the districts is different in the context of what their capital needs are and how they chunk out. If you look at a district, for example, that makes a major buildings and essentially takes themselves out of the debt market for years, they really aren't going to have those big expenditures for years. But even so, in many cases, they will build a reserve to try to soften the blow so that they're not trying to get that all at one time. And Act 1 doesn't allow it anyway, so you have those kinds of constraints to worry about. We had a pretty, I thought, very interesting presentation made by John Pauley. Is that how he pronounces his name? From Reliance. He's our bus contractor. And he talked a lot about the challenges that they face and some of the things that they're trying to do relative to the shortage of drivers that they face and some of the quality issues that they have to be made aware of constantly. They currently service 4 districts. They're a relatively young company. They've grown from 0 to 350 people in 3 years. And he talked to us about a couple of issues, one of which was the seat belt issue and some of the other things that come up in conversation from time to time. And basically that's the, I guess there were a couple other things on the agenda that I could mention here. We did talk about the budget calendar. That's on tonight's discussion. We talked about extending the contract for the auditors. I thought that was a good idea. We talked about Bright Horizons and something about their structure and the number of classes that they occupy, and if there's a contract extension in the mill for them, which is essentially an automatic. And then there was a non-agenda item that got added that dealt with the cost overrun with our consultant, New Tech, that they were looking to get about a $3,200 addition to the contract amount that they agreed on relative to the Indian Rock concrete work. And if I understand it correctly, the committee was really not anxious to do that. I'm going to stand firm.
This is the committee.
And for public comment, the next meeting will be October 16th. And that's my report.
Thank you. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. The minutes of August 28th are provided. That's section 1, item 2. Item recommended for approval on October 7th. The administration recommends board approval of the job descriptions and the establishment of school police chief and school police officer to be funded by Pennsylvania School Safety and Security Grant for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year and the entire 2020-2021 school year. We're not voting tonight, are we?
No.
Discussion?
No, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Floor is open.
Thoughts?
Well, on that note...
If you don't, I will.
All right. I'm still of the opinion, I don't see the need, regardless of whether this is granted money, free money, to have a school resource officer. I think we have two very capable, close police forces near us. I view this as an addition to our head count. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't see too many programs where we implement and then remove at a later date. In a time when we just were talking about potential for increased borrowing, increasing millage to cover debt costs, we continue to look and add positions, which is just another further constraint on our financials. Again, we add 2 officers, why not add 6? Why not add 2 per building? I don't see the need for it. I have yet to hear of tangible evidence as to how adding school resource officers is of any tangible benefit to any school district. I hear anecdotal evidence, but I don't see actual factual evidence that it's beneficial. If you can show me where there are benefits to a district of having them there, I'm open to hearing that, but as of right now, I am not for these 2 positions in any way, shape, or form the way it's been presented.
So is your concern the cost, or just that we don't need the positions?
Both.
So I guess my first question would be, what's a reasonable cost to enhance the safety of the students?
Tell me. I don't think it's 2 police officers, though.
How many of the districts in this county have taken this step to secure, is one of the steps for ensuring safety?
All of the districts in the county, with the exception of Southwestern, have school police officers or school resource officers. Southwestern has hired through other means an armed guard service, which is not a path that I would ever recommend going down. So we're the only ones in the county without any SPO or SRO. And IU-wide, as I just met with my counterparts today, there are 2 districts that don't have, they're in the same situation we're in. Although they weren't there today, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Greencastle does not.
But the ones who were there today, it's Conowago Valley and
Yep, they don't.
Upper Adams. Upper Adams.
Is Bermudian? I'm not sure Bermudian.
They weren't there today.
Okay. I don't think Bermudian is,
So-
because they're pretty small.
But in the county, they all have some presence.
Joel, you have-
something I'd like to pass out. I read it rather quickly at the personnel meeting the other day, but thought it would be a good idea just to put it in writing so we can either go through it tonight or you can do it at your leisure, but I'm absolutely not convinced at this point of the need. I understand you have the money, I'm just not convinced of the need. I'd rather fill a need than try to spend money and create a need that we don't really know at this point much about. My first statement here is that hiring a school police officer, to me, is a solution without a clear statement of that problem. I understand the money's available, and I think the next statement I make is rather sharp, and it's an opinion, but I think this is just another example of how the legislature washes its hands of doing proper school funding, proper education funding. Carve money out of the basic sub, put it into a grant program, make us compete for the grants that we would have otherwise gotten through the so-called fair funding formula. Maybe not the same, probably clearly nowhere close to the same amount. So it's a reallocation and a distortion of the fair funding formula to get us collectively hooked on a grant program which may or may not be continued in the future. If it's like most of the state grant programs, it won't be continued, and then we'll have to live with it. And for us to sit here and think that at some point this school board or a future school board is going to let police officers go once those programs are installed, I think is a stretch. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's a stretch. But once we get this going, it's impossible to stop it. So if we have the real need, if we can establish what that need is, then I think the next thing is to get past the emotional response, and let's just be realistic about what happens in these cases where there's been an active shooter somewhere in the country. We rightfully are upset by that. Our emotions boil up, our adrenaline rushes. We're going to do something. Everybody talks about doing something. A week later, well, it still may be on in the front page section, but not on the headlines. And 3 weeks later, we move on. And it's not to say that it's minimized or that it doesn't exist or it doesn't present a problem. But the statistics are such that these threats, as horrendous as they are minuscule, but the cure has no bound. There's not enough that we can do to prevent, mitigate, or even minimize some of these threats. It shows that. When you look at the response to these mass shootings that took place this year and what was already in place, 4 of the ones that I researched had police presence, and people were still killed. But they don't stop it. You know, I think we're rightfully having this discussion. It's a very emotional topic. It makes good sense to talk about it. But realistically, up to this instant in our history, what would justify a police presence in this district? What event would justify a police presence to fill the needs that we haven't yet discussed? That's where I'm coming up with my doubts about this. Now, to get to the practical side of it, we talk about whether these individuals were going to be hired, and if they are hired, well, when are they on duty? Do we require them to be present when the buses arrive and when the buses leave? There's only 2 of them. We can't have them at every school. We can't have them in every classroom. We can't have them at every event. We can't have them in the places where somebody who really wants to perpetrate harm on our district is going to be. A rational thinker says, I'll go where the police aren't. An irrational thinker says, I don't care where they are, I'm going anyway. And that's what happens. That's the reality of it. So to think that this is a deterrent, the history of police officers in schools don't reinforce that notion. It seems like it should be the case, but it isn't. We haven't talked about the financial impact. I don't think there's any way, realistically, that when this grant, and I don't mean if, but when this grant money runs out, that we will step up to the plate and cover this police force, this couple $100,000 a year commitment, without having to take it from somewhere. When we polled, Scott, you asked if the community was in support of, but did they tell you what their level of support was? Would families be willing to pay $75 to $100 per kid for security services? Or is that just an assumed cost to the taxpayer? What do we give up when we assume this additional cost? And to James's point, we have 2 full-time professional police forces now. We're part of their jurisdiction. And I think it makes sense in today's world to expect them to spend some money for training to deal with specific situations such as what might arise in the school, rather than have us go to the extent of having specialized officers. And by the way, how long does it take to get the training, the specialized school training?
Yeah, it's 5-day, 40-hour course.
40-hour course. Is that something that would be unrealistic for a local police department to sponsor for their own officers?
They do for the school resource, but you have to buy their resource officer then.
I'm not saying that you buy the resource officer. Now they're trained to deal with that just as they would deal with any other emergency in the jurisdiction that they cover, for which they're paid handsomely. These are full-time professional policemen. They're not going to come up to the boundary at school, at Suburban and say, we can't come on board because we're not trained.
Right.
They'll respond. And maybe we should have that conversation with them to say, what will you do to enhance your training and your responsiveness within the confines of the taxes that you're already getting? So I think there's that, the rapid response thing, very interesting study done by Texas State University, said that in most cases these things end on a perpetrator's initiative. They run out of bullets, who knows what goes on. They run out of will to do it. It's not surprising because these events are rare, they're difficult to anticipate, and they usually end within minutes. It's very difficult for me to imagine that anybody is on the other side of the district is going to have the wherewithal to respond to something like that. It's a right place, right time thing, and it's almost impossible for me to imagine that 2 guys, 2 gals, whomever, can cover the district and respond like that. The deterrence piece is not borne out by the statistics. I think there are some very important qualitative benefits, but I think they're more aligned with counseling and social work than with policing. And I'd be more than willing to talk about enhancing that aspect of our staff, because I think that's really where the biggest push seems to be. There's also a need to talk about unintended consequences, and that is the sort of thing that happens when there's an individual who doesn't act the way you expect a police officer to act. If they're too rough, they leave their weapons laying around. Sometimes they end up taking on the responsibilities that really rightfully belong to the administration, but they get pushed onto the police. I know we won't do that here. That's not something we would do, but somehow or other that happens in some school districts. And I would say that the bottom line is that there's going to be a trade-off at some point. These costs are going to have to compete with either existing programs or with something that we might finance in the future, but for which we no longer have the funds. And I'm just not willing to buy into something for which there's no established need. I hope that you'll consider that when you vote.
Well, I think I agree with your argument that the state will never carry this on. Where I wrestle is, I refuse to be the person that looks a parent in the eye and says, well, I'm sorry for your loss, but it was too expensive. There was no statistics that said we could have prevented it.
John, I'm not saying it's because it's too expensive. I'm saying it's because
That's
it's not
what I'm kind of
justified.
hearing. I think, you know, I worry that this is not really about the armed response you're describing. This is really about building a community of support with people in trust, I think, if I understood everything I read.
But how is that our responsibility relative to policing?
How is it not? I mean, these are our kids.
And you're saying it's our responsibility to help them build a strong relationship with policemen.
I think it's part of our responsibility to have our students develop a strong relationship built on trust rather than mistrust.
But how does bringing a police officer specifically address that?
I think it helps with familiarity. I think it helps with day-to-day contact.
Can't the same thing be accomplished some other way by just having an armed member of the Spring Gardner, Springs Ferry Township Police Force come in?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's not a daily thing. That's
This
just,
wouldn't be either,
Well-
except to the extent that, yes, they're on campus all the time, but not in every building.
they're always a presence,
Not
so.
with every kid.
I think we, I hate the idea that we have to have police on a campus.
I don't think we need them. You're saying you hate the idea that we need them, which means you think we need them.
I think it's one of several pieces of things to protect kids in a difficult environment. I do, yeah.
I can respect that.
I just don't want to be the person that stands up to a parent and said, no, the data showed it didn't matter. That just makes me very uncomfortable.
I think you're misreading.
I don't think so.
When you say it doesn't matter, the question again is, what is the need?
Well, I looked at the data, and the chances were very small your child was going to be killed.
No. What is the need? What is the
I think
the
that
role of this individual, and what is the need that it's meeting?
I think the role is described in both the grant and this was to establish a presence within the school community to build trust, build understanding amongst people, and to provide what's the word I'm looking for? A presence that is not an armed presence, but is a presence of authority. Maybe that's the word.
So
I'm looking for.
where is the mistrust out of this district?
Before you get
I think
off that, I thought I heard something, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. Not an armed presence. Is that what
Well,
you said?
I'm saying that I don't think that's the focus.
But that's what we're talking about, an armed presence.
Yeah, but that's not the reason. We're not saying we need a gun in the school. We're saying we need a specially trained officer who regularly interfaces with students to try to build relationships and head off problems before they become problems.
Why are we not hearing about all these problems now? Or let's say, before the grant application had been accepted and before we start having these conversations, why wouldn't we be talking about hiring school police officers devoid of all this money from the state? When did this conversation start?
Has Miranda brought up the fact that we're missing a school resource officer, and that's a critical need, and if we had that, then things would improve from a communication and safety standpoint? She's been a social worker here for a year now. I mean, she would hear about it certainly, right, or the guidance office, or...
And if she did, that would make a difference for you?
It would provide further evidence. To set them open to listening, but all I'm hearing is, I don't want to look somebody in the eye and say, we don't have a school resource officer, and I just don't, why haven't we heard about this until this grant showed up? If this grant wasn't here, I don't remember...
No, I remember conversations about this before this grant was
I remember
ever-
bringing up the position, but I never heard that there was a strong, or there was any level of mistrust in this community with our police force. I'm sorry, I just...
Whoa.
Yeah, that's
Nobody
not the
said
same
that.
thing.
Nobody said that.
What's being stated?
Nobody said that there's a level of mistrust.
Well,
with the police
we're
force.
doing this to build trust with them, right? So the opposite of that is there is a mistrust out of
No,
our
that's not
community.
true at all.
Yeah.
That's faulty.
But if that is what you're trying to build on, does that mean there's an absence of it going on right now?
I think there's always an opportunity to improve and build a community of trust, and
So where is it proven that putting a police officer on campus improves it?
where is it proved it doesn't?
Well, you can't
But you want to spend money on this?
Yeah, I do.
I don't know.
Or accept the grant, we're not necessarily
willing to
spending
put
money.
Correct.
something,
I'm willing to accept the grant and have this hard fight again in 16 months.
How are you going to measure the improvement in trust?
I would rely on the faculty, I would rely on the social workers. This is not something that I'm going to be able to count data on, I don't think.
We're going to count the dollars.
Wait a minute, you can actually, couldn't you? I mean, if we have a number of, faculty and staff supporting the presence of an armed officer, would that imply that there's a certain unease or discomfort with the way things stand now?
I'd ask that question to go back out. Would you support an armed officer, and are you willing to pay for it with increased taxes? Ask that same question and ask if they're willing
That's a different discussion.
Why? It's a very valid question.
Yeah,
though.
but this is the
It
data
is.
we have, James, and it's implying to me, it's an implication, that there's a certain level of concern on the part of the faculty and staff and parents over the lack of an armed
Fair.
officer.
Ask if they're willing to pay for it when the grant's done.
Well, wait,
from a
let's-
logical standpoint, I wouldn't try to infer that from these statistics. The question was an affirmative answer. It wasn't a question about how they feel and what their motivation is for
Okay.
their answer.
All right. But if they weren't concerned, wouldn't they answer differently, Joel?
I don't know.
Why would they?
How would you
Yeah.
feel about having a police officer? Is it positive? Yeah, fine. It doesn't mean I think there's a need for it, but I wouldn't push back on it necessarily. I'd like to know what the need is. What is driving this?
Well, in my mind, I mean, the questions were rate your support of having an armed officer being hired. I mean,
Can you just infer, well, I have no problem with that? I don't want to infer anything from it. The
Okay.
question was answered
okay.
in the affirmative, but it doesn't mean they're clamoring to have people come on staff immediately, does it? Is that what you would take from that in your travels around the district? Are you being talked to now by teachers and staff members saying, man, when are you going to get these policemen? Come on. What are you waiting on?
I'll say this year, there's been a heightened level of it due to some security issues that have happened. There's been some questions asked of me.
Security issues such as?
I think the relative to the middle school incident increased a high level of concern from the staff.
And do they honestly think that having a policeman on board would have done something to mitigate that somehow?
There's a level of presence and security that I think individuals feel. I think the analogy that I used when you put 1,000 people into a building, let's use the high school, for example, if you had a concert, or event, or a showcase, if you put 1,000 people there, it would be more than likely that there'd be some level of security present to demonstrate ease or comfort, and a level of communication, to channel communication in one direction, to provide a resource. So I think in this particular year, yes, I have been approached by individuals with regards to the incident of the safety at the middle school.
Can you share some of the statements that you heard? I mean, were there specifics? Were people saying, look, this is something you really got to step on?
Yes, I would say, and I would even say Mr. Evans was present in quite a few of those conversations where people had a heightened level of fearfulness about security presence, having the ability to respond in an appropriate fashion and on-site, both on-site, and I'll say in one particular case, the ability to be present and be aware. Again, trained officers to have that knowledge.
And following that incident, I think the administrative staff spent an inordinate amount of time trying to calm people down, because this is an emotional argument for some people.
There's no doubt about that.
Some people at that middle school situation just were beside themselves. They had trouble coping with the reality that somebody was in the building over the weekend.
And I would suggest that they'd have that same
I would,
emotional fervor if our school police officer, I mean, this happened when?
over the weekend.
Right.
But while they were there on Monday,
School police officer is off duty, somebody breaks into the school.
that's not the issue for them. The issue for them is that they would have felt better if they had a police, if that happened and we had an SRO, and the SRO goes to different places, but that day, that SRO would have been there.
And why not somebody from the local police department coordinating?
I think to John's point, it's the communication. Arriving to see a police officer you're familiar with and have been communicating with and had student relationships with is different in the eyes of a teacher who builds trust relationship to whoever was on the swing shift that particular morning would have been the individual they were interacting with.
I think that's an interesting statement about the teachers.
Well, I mean, and, if we go back to the time we had...
They don't have comfort with the local police department?
I think they do, but having worked with an SRO in the past in the district, there is a certain level of trust that develops when you're working repeatedly with the same individual. And I think that helps to, again, create that ease. To Dr. Williams' point, that level of anxiousness and uneasy feeling as an emotional state, for whatever reason it may be there, for each individual person it's different, but having a consistent factor and a consistent person is a help for those individuals.
I think, was it, the months are running together now, was it last spring that we had the incident in the high school cafeteria, the fight that the teacher got in the middle of and got hit? Was that last spring?
Correct.
Because I had to meet with the association about that. There were concerns then. That was last spring. So these things happen. And I'm not saying that an SRO, an SPO might be on site, but as part of this overall feeling of collaboration, I just think it's not a bad thing.
I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, I would say it's not a necessary thing, that the services that were provided could be done by other members of the staff.
I think we differ there slightly, yeah, Rich.
Well, if I may, because, I mean, it was the Personnel Committee, I was there, and I'd like to add my 2 cents. All this discussion, I mean, we're talking about separate missions. I mean, if we're talking about hiring 2 school police officers, I mean, invariably we start talking about these officers responding to an active shooter situation. I don't envision these positions as outlined by the administration as being 2 gunslingers who are going to be sitting around waiting for somebody to show up with a lot of firepower. They're going to have an active role in the district all the time, and I would compare it this way. Our local police departments, rather, are 2 tactical units. Something happens, we call these guys, they come into the school. They don't have an intimate knowledge. They don't have an intimate knowledge of the student body. They don't have an intimate knowledge of the personnel who work here. If we have 2 school police officers, they are, in my view, are akin to beat cops. They're going to know where the trouble spots are. They're going to know the students who are at risk of either being the cause of a problem or the victims of a problem. And I think they'll be more attuned to responding in a preventative measure to nip these situations in the bud before it gets out of hand. That's internal. I mean, I think the way these positions are described, a large part of their job is going to be internal. As far as the value of these positions, I mean, we're referring to them as kind of a placebo effect when it comes to the active shooter situation. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not really.
Excuse me, sir, please, may I finish? One of the things that we did for the Personnel Committee was to invite our local representatives, just to let them know that this is not a situation where Suburban's going to just take the grant money and call it a day. This is a situation we're discussing it, and we're debating it. Only one showed up, Representative Hill Evans. One of the things she mentioned in the public comment section was something we overlooked in our survey. What is the feeling of the student body? Her statement referred to a specific meeting she had here at the district last year where students expressed a concern about their safety in the district. And I would submit to you, not only is it not a discussion any of us want to have to look a parent in the eye to say, sorry, your kid got shot, we had the money available, but we didn't take it, which I don't think is a good idea. But conversely, we have students coming into school every day with enough stress in their lives, wondering whether or not they're going to make it out alive every day. If that's something we could alleviate, I think that's a good thing. That's it.
Well, I think we're not going to solve this tonight. We have a couple more weeks
Well,
to think it
but
over.
we do need to hash this out. We're voting on this next meeting.
Yes,
So
you are.
if we've got to take 3 hours to discuss this, then
Okay.
we take 3 hours
The problem
because,
is we're shorthanded tonight, too.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
you know, and my counter to that is, where is it proven that a school resource officer or a school police officer adds or lessens that frustration versus adding another social worker? Okay? And if we're going to go with 2, why 2? Why not make it 12? Why not make it 1 for every classroom? If we're going to have beat cops, the whole point is...
Well, no, Steve, again, you're misrepresenting it.
No,
They're
no,
not
I'm
beat
saying,
cops.
why
No,
are we
that's
defining it as
nonsense.
It's not nonsense.
Yeah.
Where'd you come up with 2? Why not have 4 part-timers and have 4 buildings covered?
If
I don't know.
may, from a Personnel Committee standpoint, 2, because it's covered by the grant. And if we look at this as a pilot program, at the end of the time that the grant runs, we can evaluate whether or not this was a tangible benefit to the district or not. All of the board members sitting here tonight and next month are going to be on the board when we have to make that decision. Now, we're all throwing up our hands saying, my God, if we get these guys, we're never that's it. It's the slippery slope. Not necessarily.
Right.
I object to that argument.
Where's the proof that it's not?
If somebody says to me, there was really no tangible benefit to hiring these officers, I would be the first one to say then we just eliminate it. It's a pilot program. But we have to try. And I think there will be tangible benefit. I could be wrong.
I'd like to see.
I often am.
I'd like to see the measurement of the tangible benefit.
How about the measurement of the tangible benefit at the end of the 2 years when the grant
Well,
runs
it's
out?
actually a year and a half now.
Year and a half. How about the tangible
What are we
benefit
going to
at the
look
year
at
and
to
a half?
measure? We're voting whether we're going to approve this position or not next meeting. What are we going to do to measure? We probably spent 4 to 5 months discussing a social worker to come up with a tangible measurement for them, and we couldn't come up with that in 4 to 5 months. Now we're being asked, after a personnel committee meeting, after 2 job descriptions, and now we're voting on it for a year-and-a-half pilot program, and we don't know what it's going to mean. So what does that mean? Somebody anecdotally is going to come up to you and say, I don't like them here, and I don't like them armed, and is that going to be enough for you? I'm not saying that to poke at you. I'm saying, what are we doing to measure to say in a year and a half that these school resource officers armed are going to make that much of a difference? When we haven't even looked at the social worker and determined whether what she's doing is making a marked difference. I think she is, but how are we supposed to determine that? Again, not looking at the school shooter example, we are looking at making them more comfortable and more safe in school. Students, parents, constituents in the area. We don't know how to measure that. So now we're going to do a pilot program. What's the exit strategy after a year and a half?
I
Money runs out?
think I would turn to our faculty, I would turn to our students and say, simple survey.
And again, the other thing I'm going to object to here is when I'm getting claimed that I'm misrepresenting something, I'm asking a counter question. Okay? I'm not misrepresenting what I'm saying.
You are. You're asking it in a certain shaded way, though, to try to...
It's not shaded.
It
It's
is.
not shaded. All I'm saying is we're rushing through this process right now.
We've been doing this for 6 months.
We're
I'm
certainly
not sure.
We're not rushing through this.
And we still don't have a measurement criteria as to whether we know this is going to work or not. And I don't see the need. I really don't see the need. And I'm piggybacking that on top of, I'm sorry, I do have a financial concern over this. We're looking at increasing millage rates. We're looking at borrowing $40 to $60 million, and we added a social worker, we added a school resource officer, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with adding them, but we keep adding positions and straining our budget. And we keep doing it without defining the need because it feels good.
How is this straining our budget?
A social worker isn't straining our budget?
No, the...
School police officer.
How are we going to exit out of this if it doesn't work? What's the decision?
You're going to raise your hand and vote no.
How are we going to exit out of it if we don't measure the results? What's our exit strategy on it?
Well, that's simple. I think you go to the faculty, you go to the students, and you try to measure well-being, sense of well-being, comfort. And I don't think you'll ever get a number measurement of this, but if you can get a sense from students and faculty that they feel better or improved.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything quantitative that can be done to measure such a thing. Same with social worker. It's going to be qualitative measurement.
Okay.
If I may, I think there might be a quantitative measure if you use the Secret Service model for school safety. And that's in the reporting of the number of incidents that were uncovered as a result of having a school security officer. Now, I'm not summarizing the report very well, but having read it, I think that was one of the salient points of their model. You're putting an intelligence network in place, basically. Because, I mean, looking at a lot of the worst school shooting incidents, they were perpetrated by students or former students. And the body count doesn't necessarily have to be double digits. It's often not. But according to the Secret Service model, that is one effective quantitative measure you can come up with, where you have a number of incidents identifying students who are at risk of certain violent behaviors. I have the report, I can share it with you, James,
Sure,
if you
that'd
like.
be great.
Okay.
Great.
I'd like to know if the administration would have come to us at this point in time, had we not had this grant, which you, by your own admission, we didn't think we were going to get this grant. Were you going to come to us for $200,000 a year in security?
It'd have been a hard sell for me to come to you asking for $200,000.
I've expressed my concerns previously, and a lot of them showing need. I think we work more carefully with our existing police departments as we have done. I have a real concern about the financial aspects because I just know what the state does when it comes to grants and ending them very, and I think to turn around in 18 months or 16 months and say to the faculty, well, we're going to discontinue this. We're also at that point in time, if we believe any of our population studies, it's going to be about that time we have to start to hire more faculty, or we increase the teaching load of our teachers. We have a choice. We keep police officers, or do we get another English or social studies or kindergarten teacher or whatever it is that we need? That's without considering debt service if we have to do any additions or corrections, as I like to call them, to our buildings at this point. I know it's a tough decision. It is one that I, kind of hammer away at my better half every day about, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Well, I have a sounding block anyway, so after 51 years, she's my best choice. But it is a very difficult decision to make in Suburban. It will definitely, and people laugh at me, this is a cultural change at York Suburban. You're a former student, and this is going to be a cultural change, putting police officers, armed police officers, in our buildings all the time. Now, I know that our SROs from the police departments carry their weapons, I believe, when they come into the buildings anyway. So, but this is going to be our police force now. This is because apparently the grant will not cover us working with our police departments, which I think was very foolish of the grant.
Well, no, it actually, I take issue with that.
Because of the structural nature.
I take issue with that was a foolish move. Because when you have SROs, you have less control over their working conditions. I've experienced it firsthand. I know that to be true.
I know, it's a different working relationship
Oh
than you
my
have with
gosh.
somebody who works for you, and you have control over them. And you said, our expectations for these people. I agree with the statements that have been made that having two with 6 buildings is iffy. I mean, I have the same concern with not having the fully qualified school nurses in every building. It is a difference when you don't have them there all of the time. Pushing into the classrooms, doing activities with them. I don't know where we get all that time with our students, because we're now screaming they don't have enough time to do the reading, writing, and arithmetic and all the other things that need to be done on a daily basis with these students. So, at this moment in time, I'm not supporting this, and I have been very clear about that from the beginning.
So when the vote comes up, you will have an opportunity to vote your conscience. That's right.
This is one of the regrettable times when being on the Personnel Committee is actually significant. Item 3.
Who'd have thunk it?
Consent agenda. You have before you the excuse me?
We finally got to that.
Okay. You have before you the personnel report, which includes employment, resignation, extracurricular appointments / RE appointments, and volunteers. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves with alacrity for approval of the below-mentioned items.
Second.
With alacrity?
Thank God for small numbers.
Questions or comments?
Define alacrity.
I think this can be a short roll call vote, Ms. Mason.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Legislative update.
None to report.
Oh, no, this is your opportunity to vote, isn't it?
Oh, that's right.
Lost your chance.
We have to vote on the PA School Boards Association officer elections. And after extensive research and analysis of the slate of candidates, there is only one race that has more candidates than there are seats. That would be for school board secretaries. And on that basis, I would recommend Jennifer Davidson, Beth Ann Ziegler, and Jamie Lynn Zimmerowski for those positions.
I second the motion.
All other candidates are acceptable.
Views to the contrary.
Go ahead.
Oh, come on. So I guess we have to vote on this. Can we can make this a unanimous roll call vote, a short roll call vote, Ms. Mason, I think?
Yeah. This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Right.
What if she wins by 5?
Ms. Fryrick?
Okay, LIU, we will actually have our first meeting of this school year tomorrow evening, and there are a number of things on the agenda. However, one of them will be to approve the idea that we will only be meeting quarterly moving forward. I suspect that the new chief out of the LIU decided we didn't have to meet so frequently, which will be fine with all of us who have lots of other board meetings, but I will report back to you after that. York Adams Academy, we will also be meeting tomorrow evening, and as of now, all of our seats are filled. That concludes that report. I have one other report that I'd like to do at this point.
Okay.
I attended my last and final meeting of the committee of the Springersbury Township Water Quality Program Advisory Committee. Yes, you will be getting a bill, those of you who live in Springersbury Township, next May 1st. Prior to that, they're going to do a lot of things, approve a budget, approve a condition and a half to run this program, and beginning somewhere around December 1st, you will be able to go onto the township website, put in your address, and find out how much your fee is going to be. Interestingly enough, I went on for my property, I don't know, most of you know where I live in the corner up in Haynes Acres, and I have a 1.5 ERUs, that's equivalent residential unit, which means I'm going to get billed for $75. Now, beginning about December 1st, you will have the opportunity, if you go onto the website and want to challenge what your fee will be as of the May 1st billing, you can then, there's forms to fill out that you can, and they have up to 60 days to expedite any inquiries and any, if you have some way that you could reduce your fee by either cleaning out a storm sewer, you're going to clean the property, or you don't agree with them, or, as our good friend here, Mr. Tubman, he has a very pervious driveway, so he's going to look really good, and I'm sure he'll have to remind them of that come time when his bill arrives. But anyway, this is a very interesting thing, committee to be on. I thank Dr. Williams for asking me to go. They've already picked out 2 or 3 major projects within the township that will meet curing us of our almost 700,000 pounds of runoff every year. So, but this fee will arrive, and I suspect it's going to go for a lot of years to come, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mason, York Adams Tax Bureau?
No report.
Ms. Schrader's not here. Did you have a...
The groundbreaking. That's
Okay. All right. You have the board meeting schedule posted online, and this would be your last opportunity for public comment. No takers? I think we're adjourned. Thank you.